So here I want to give a bit of a build update for Fury, Crossbow and Wand. This is as of the 7th of October, so if it's at a later date, keep an eye out in the pinned comment for an update. Since the last patch, it can now deal some seriously high damage, as all curses have pretty much been doubled in damage. Fully buffed up, I can kill a dummy in about 12 seconds, as you can see by this little clip here that I also posted as a short yesterday. Without any buffs, it will take you a bit longer, as you miss that base damage through Stellarite, the Remedy, and also Guardian. You won't have that big jump in cooldown, which you will have in a more real fight scenario, as you'll have generally deadly markers. But it'll take you about 24 seconds to kill a dummy. Again, with this build and with my server connection being around 60 to 110 ms, it varies around that. And it can be particularly important as you need that attack speed to reapply those curses. So this build comes with an accompanying document, which will also go through everything you need to know how to put together the build for yourself. And it does highlight exactly what you can use starting in step 1. So when you've just started the game and got to level 55, you will go to Path of Ascension, and in step 1 you will claim all this maxed out gear. Step 2, giving the earrings, and you simply copy exactly this with fitting in the runes, weapons and accessories, same as here. And we can go step 2, 3 and finally 4. You will also find a link to some additional resources here, including Questlog, if you're more comfortable looking at this for all those build steps. And keep in mind of alternative weapons like Malakars and Luciens. So in this video, I want to go through my full build update, but I first also want to highlight how Fury can be improved even further by benefiting a ton through the new Tevent Orb, which is very likely to get even buffed further later this month. I did manage to confirm in Nightmare mode of the new raid how this interaction works with my Fury, as one player has the actual Tevent Orb and could apply those debuffs on the boss. And you can see how my curses here, Tevent, this is the icon right here for it, goes up to 55 seconds. Combined with Witching Hour, you get to 59 seconds. And this is, as I showed in a previous video, because the Tevent Orb increases those durations up to 60% due to the debuff duration. As you can see, Tevent goes to 59.88 seconds, followed by these other curses getting up to 26 seconds. Unfortunately, Touch of Despair remains stuck at 15 seconds due to the change that they made to effectively nerf it. But what this means is you can hit curse explosions of upwards of 800,000 if my build was better optimized, because I was actually running a survivability setup here with over 22,000 hit points, so I wouldn't get, say, one shot by these certain mechanics if I, say, failed them. So I was missing quite a lot of damage on this build. So you could probably be hitting curse explosions above 1 million, and with a deadly marker in the group, this should be every like 3 seconds, which is kind of nuts. However, there is something pretty broken with regards to curses and specifically field bosses. I'm not 100% sure why, but you will find in this example, I fought Alon, Junabote, Talus, and confirmed with normal damage. And what you find is your curse explosions will be dealing 5 to 10 times less damage than they actually should in a normal PvE fight. Like, look, a measly 40,000 versus what I get in a similar group setup against Shaikal of over 400,000. So they've done something to seriously reduce the damage effectiveness of curses on these ascended field bosses. However, it's not just curses. You will find that all normal damage will be about 50% less. I'm dealing like 15,000 on Fireball here, as you can see with this test again, even as low as 13,000, and that's with a critical hit, so maximum damage, while we use the stealth. Here was over 17,000, and I believe that's going to be due to the debuffs that people put. This test kind of hurt, but yeah, needed to do it to compare versus dummies. Dummies do not have any defense and don't have any extra damage reduction. And you can see the value here, like 39,000, nearly 40,000. And if I use my calculator, input the exact stats we had, we can see the expected value that we got on the dummy, and we can look at the value we're getting on the Ascended Field Boss here, just over 15,000, which means we've gone from this value to this value, which is about a 50% damage reduction when we also account for the flat defense value that these Ascended bosses have when you look at guild raids. But this 50% reduction does not translate properly to what we're seeing with curses and our curse explosion, as we seem to be getting a much bigger damage reduction for them. Again, we seem to be going from a value of like over 440,000 on those curse explosions on normal PvE bosses, which should have like 1,181 defense. So we'll put that value like this, which means we're experiencing a damage loss of like 90%. We're only dealing 10% of our original damage, which absolutely destroys the output of damage on Fury here. And that is why you will not really see great contribution values in those field bosses. I don't know if the devs will ever address this, but for all other content, Fury seriously kicks ass. Like in the raid, in the trial, the only other class that can pretty much compete with you and probably do better is Crucifix because of their party synergy, particularly with Satellite Copy and the sheer amount of extra damage hits they get with that. But that could potentially still get changed. So let's finally go through my Fury build update for Tier 3 and what kind of new gear you want to be heading towards. Again, step 1 here is super simple. Just copy the exact gear I've chosen here with what you claim and choose from the packs you get through Path of Ascension. Just do those tasks. This is the Adventure Codex there. You'll do it while you level up and fill out those rune slots here by going to your rune book, selecting on that gear piece. You're going to have to unlock the slots here by paying a solent cost and just unlock them in the order of the rune synergy. So for example, right here, for us to get this dexterity and attack speed. And there's more details on that in the rune section here. So step 2 is when you want to be getting some upgrades with Tier 3 gear. And I would honestly go with the Lucien's Crossbow and the Lucien's Wand as you're starting out as very budget options. You'll also be wanting to get the Spectral 2-piece set and Sacred 2 pieces. You can stay with the Scaled Gloves and you'll want to get the Hellfire Cloak, Volcanic Bracelet, Collar of the New Moon. Stay with the 2 rings you got in step 1 here and upgrade to this belt and these earrings. All of them are very accessible. If you have Da Vinci's Favor, you can summon the crafter. Otherwise, you go to the All Things Merchant and you can see you can craft the Lucien's weapons here. You just need these Fortitude coins. You can craft the cloak and you'll find those accessories here too you can craft. You can also select that item, click the exclamation, it shows you where you can acquire them through drops. But you will get these Fortitude coins by doing your co-op dungeons or dimensional trials. I would recommend doing these instead. Open the chest, you get the Fortitude coins. You ideally want to do it through the party matchmaking to get the extra random Q box. And otherwise you should get a lot of Fortitude coins if you got, say, this leveling pass. And so yeah, that's what I would recommend here for step 2. And again, you will unlock the rune slots and fill them out. Step 3 is when you're getting to the raid and you start getting this legendary gear. If you save enough entropy shards, you'll also be able to purchase it at the merchant over in Harbour Village, just here. And good luck on the stats you get, and you will very likely want to go to stat conversion and swap them out to what I suggest, as per the legendary gear sections, described in weapons, armor, and accessories. Just be aware, there are some alternatives, like a ring you could have cooldown speed, or you could have strength, or even fortitude would be fine. And the weapon, you could have perception, dexterity, strength, even fortitude you could make work. I wouldn't be in a rush to switch those. Even buff duration and attack speed can be very useful here too. So if you do get those as the random drop, don't be too much in a rush to spend all these resources to switch those. You can make them work in your build. And do be aware, this spectral armor, you can craft it using a lithograph that you get from the auction, but you can also craft it with loyalty coins. I wouldn't recommend it though. Better to spend them on unlock stones, which you can use to unlock expensive traits on gear pieces, or convert the stats on your legendary gear. You can also get lucky when you're at tier 5 of the Material Transmutation system to get them as a drop here. You don't necessarily have to have the spectral headpiece and chest plate with the sacred legs and the boots. You could have sacred headpiece, sacred pants, spectral chest, spectral boots. You can mix and match. You just need 2 pieces sacred for this damage over time and 2 pieces spectral for the critical damage. Once you do get to step 4, you can try and hunt for the Necklace of Morning Mist. You can buy yourself the Band of Brutal Agony or get a lucky drop from guild bosses. And that's really about it. You're pretty much at your min-max build here. In terms of weapon, yes, you could switch to the Queen Bellandir's crossbow. All things considered, it has gotten pretty cheap these days, and it will probably get a buff later this month. But you can make do with just the Lucien's crossbow or even Malakar's crossbow for team support. Like ideally you would have one person in your party using this in an optimal PvE setting. If we do look at a bit of a comparison and a breakdown, these are the stats with say the Lucien's crossbow, and this is then compared versus the Bellandir crossbow, which is about 4% better just because of this damage over time, the venom effect, which also contributes to your curse explosions. And again, Bellandir is very likely to get buffed within the following weeks. It's just the cost does add up because you don't necessarily just want it on this stage, you also want to get it upgraded, which requires all these ashen carapaces. But if we look at other sections in the document, you can see some descriptions as to what stats to go for. When you are selecting your attributes here, you primarily want to focus on getting dexterity and wisdom as high as possible. 99 is the limit, and don't put more than 20 points into them. Because if you put more than 20, you can see it's going to consume 2 of these points just to get up 1 level. And that's not worth it. You're better off putting the points somewhere else. So after dexterity and wisdom, it's perception as your priority. And finally, you dump the rest in strength if they don't fit anywhere else. And yeah, just keep in mind of these other stats, including weaken chance, to be able to apply those weakens. If you don't have enough weaken chance, you probably won't be able to reapply those curses in time before you cast your next curse explosion, like you can see we do here, as you will be casting a curse explosion, like again, every 3 seconds, and it should be dealing upwards of 600, 700,000, up to 1 million damage per explosion if you're buffed up and with an optimized build. And that's then massively boosted with Detonation Mark. But moving on, you can see my recommendations with legendary weapons and the different stats. You can potentially get away with the legendary crossbow if you have the Tevent's wand. And this will be getting a buff again later this month. Wand skill cores, again it's pretty much just Tevent or Deckman, nothing new with tier 3. Crossbows, again it's Bellandir or Lucien's. Armor, you pretty much want the gloves, but you could potentially get away with the legendary chest piece here and get the extra buff duration on it. But you will miss quite a bit of attack speed. Accessories, you want that ring with the attributes and maybe the cooldown on it. You can see my priorities for the normal traits, resonance traits, and then the runes and those synergies. You will be wanting to upgrade to chaos runes to get like extra buff duration, and potentially on weapons you might not need the buff duration. If you already get a near 100% uptime on selfless diffusion, then at that point you can just take more skill damage boost. Again, in a party when you have deadly markers, you get nearly enough cooldown that you can see right here like we did. We had enough to be able to just instantly cast selfless diffusion as soon as its effect expired, and that at that point you don't need more buff duration, you don't need more cooldown speed. But yeah, the rest of the things are here. You want to get max mana for maximum base damage boost. That's from your wand mastery. Warrior's Gambit, it gives you a boost of base damage equal to a percentage of your max mana. So you generally take that instead of hit points, but you can always switch them back to hit points if you need more survivability. Rings, you can take a weaken chance. And in terms of artifacts, it's just 4-piece Chaos Harbinger with a Plains Ravager for the Solar Stone and the Abyssal for the Lunar Stone. So you get these effects. But you can potentially, for survivability, go with full Ancestral, but you are of course reducing your damage. And then we'll look at skill setups and rotations. So my current skill setup is this right here, but it varies on the fight. If there's no other crossbow user who uses weak point, then I will use that instead of, say, Nimble Leap here, or instead of Janice's Rage if the healer's using it. You can read what I say here. Also, passives change a little bit. If you're using the Mastery Vampiric Onslaught, then you won't use Full of Corruption, and you can use Corrupted Nail or Ambidexterity. Just in dummy tests, you don't really need the weaken chance, and so I just have Nature's Power here for the extra skill damage boost whenever I use Nimble Leap. You can look at the specializations, and this is currently the setup. You don't necessarily need these specs in Nimble Leap, particularly Immune, and you could throw those into the cooldown on Ray of Disaster, the area on Janice Rage, or if you need mana, this one here for Mana Exchange. In shorter boss fights and in fights where the boss phases and has long damage resistance, then I don't need Mana Exchange. But if I did, I would say switch out Janice Rage, again if the healer's using that, or I would switch off like Ray of Disaster. In terms of the specializations that you really need, it's Detonation Mark here, Mother Nature's on Flame Shot, Selfless Diffusion on Ignore Directions, although not a must-have if you can properly position yourself behind the boss when you have a tank. But if I'm tanking the boss, I like to have this because then I'm in the front and I'll still gain the back attacks when I have this. For wands, you really need to have the chance to get 2 stacks. You don't necessarily need effect duration. It only increases by like 1 second because it's already at 14 seconds and the cap is 15. Curse Explosion, you need these two. Corrupted Magic Circle, you ideally have Rotten Marsh. You don't necessarily need this one. If you want Janice Rage, you of course need that. Witching Hour, you need that right here. You don't necessarily need this one. Enchanting Time, you need this one. Valorous Barrier, you need this. You don't necessarily need duration increase if you have enough buff duration and cooldown. And yeah, the rest are kind of optional. You can sometimes even use Fountain of Life for some support healing and some support mana instead of like Mana Exchange or Ray of Disaster. You can see in the document the rotation that I recommend. You're just using your buffs, Corrupted Magic Circle because that takes a bit of cast time, and then the Selfless Diffusion and all these. Generally, you do cast Selfless before detonation so that you have that higher chance to get 2 stacks on it. But if it's already active, then just wait till after your Curse Explosion. Or if you're doing a dummy test, and you can just retry if you didn't get 2 stacks on the first cast. Again, these are just filler skills. Ray of Disaster, you can switch to Janice Rage, Nimble Leap. And if you do have Nimble Leap, you pretty much cast it at any break window. So like just before you're going to cast a curse, so that you give it that critical damage boost, because whenever you apply a new curse, it will snapshot the stats that you had when you cast it. So you can usually try to cast Nimble Leap, Curse, and then your Curse Explosion combo, or just after you've cast Curse Explosion and before you reapply your next Touch of Despair, you use Nimble Leap, then Touch of Despair. But it is a new thing I'm kind of messing around with. There is a bit of a multi-target mob farming setup here, but I don't really use it. But you can do some decent multi-target damage. In terms of masteries, we have that setup right here. May have changed slightly just to optimize it a little bit better. And yes, there are 2 like level 20 slots here. That's because you can use either or for the wand, and same for the crossbow. You can use either or for step 13. Movement speed or mana, depending what you need. Like my mana would never drop below 30, so this is kind of pointless. And maybe you want some extra movement speed. You could take those movement speed ones instead of, say, the range boost ones. You can read my descriptions here based on what you can switch. Like if you don't need these self heals, I can remove Nightmare, put that in here, the attack range, then remove this, replace it, and now we have Vampiric Onslaught. We can't have Nightmare since we don't have any of these boosts anyway then. You will also want to switch some passives if you're switching those masteries, and again, just read that here for the details. Overall mastery skills, one of the ones that's actually pretty big boost for dummy tests is this one right here. I just got it, I just pushed for it, and that's the extra buff duration, just so you can have higher uptime on Selfless Diffusion for that full duration of like the 12 seconds in that 12-second dummy test I posted. And then I have this one for the base damage, the extra stats, and this poison, which just helps for like curse explosions because it's another damage over time. But it's a 60-second cooldown, so I don't really know how effective it is, and maybe you want to replace it with Destruction Spear, which is 5 seconds, or Falling Flower, which is 6 seconds, but they're all just not very impactful, and this just helps to improve your overall damage. On a last note, consumables, make sure you're using that Stellarite, the species damage food here, depending what enemy you're facing. They are listed pretty much everywhere, like you're looking at this one right here, the guy's undead, she is also undead, this guy's too, and so is this guy. And yeah, they're just listed right there depending on what dungeon you're running. Or if you're doing a field boss, you can click on them, you can click on the weapon, go here, how to acquire, and it tells you this boss is undead. Or you go to guild raid, and they're all listed here as well. And then you'll want buffs like Scorpion Tail Fritters, Mushroom Stir Fry, Vegetable Stir Fry, Clam and Seafood Soup, Mana Regen Potion, a Remedy, and then also like Recovery Crystals for a heal. Guardian I usually use Lady Knight, but you can also use Wild Enchanter. And that's it. Additional resources here, link to Questlog, link to the basic damage formula, and link to the more advanced calculator, like that breakdown I was showing here. You just need to go to file, you need to make a copy so that it's your document, because this is mine, I'm sharing it for you, but you can only view it, because if you could edit it, then you could just mess up the entire thing for me, or for anybody else who wanted to copy this document. It's not a website. If you edit it, you're editing for everybody. If I edit it, I edit for everybody. But that's about it for my build update for Fury here. It's really effective. It's just a bit screwed for boss fights. I don't really know why. For some reason, you have a pretty massive negative modifier. You're only dealing like 10% of your normal damage on curse explosions, versus everybody else who seems to be only dealing 50% less damage of their normal, so half as much, while you're losing like nearly 10 times your normal damage. And that probably also affects Invocator, and thus they will also be a bit behind in damage on those boss fights versus other classes. I hope the devs can look at it and address it, or at least give a public announcement if they think that's how they want it to be. Overall, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys around.